They were just children. 3 little boys huddled together on a freezing night, their stomachs empty for the 2nd day in a row. But when a billionaire in a tailored suit stopped near them, they didn't beg for money. They didn't ask for food. Instead, with trembling hands, they broke their only piece of bread into 3 parts and offered him one. In that moment, the man who thought he had everything discovered what it meant to have nothing. And for the first time in years, tears rolled down his face in front of strangers. The city was alive with neon lights and hurried footsteps. But on the forgotten side of the street, time moved differently. There, beneath the dim glow of a flickering lamppost, 3 little boys sat huddled together on the cracked pavement. They were no older than 7, their faces nearly identical, the unmistakable look of triplets. Their thin jackets did little. Against the biting cold of the evening, passers-by walked quickly, adjusting their coats, tightening their scarves, avoiding the sight of the children as if ignoring them would make them disappear. But the boys didn't complain. They didn't shout. They didn't beg. Instead, on a small piece of brown paper, they placed what little treasure they had left, a single piece of stale bread. The eldest, though only minutes older than his brothers, tore the bread carefully into 3 equal parts. His small hands trembled in the cold, but his concentration was absolute. He wanted it to be fair, even if the piece was too small to fill their empty stomachs. His brothers watched him silently, eyes wide, lips chapped from the wind. When he was finished, he handed each boy his share. They smiled faintly, as if this ritual, this act of dividing hunger, was as normal as breathing. One of them tucked his piece carefully into his pocket, saving it for later. Another took the smallest bite imaginable, chewing slowly, as though stretching time itself. The last boy held his bread, but did not eat at all. Instead, he looked at his brothers and whispered, "If you're full, then I'll be full too." None of them were full. None of them had been full in days. But in their innocent minds, hunger was something they could fight with smiles, with brotherhood, with love. Cars passed by in a blur of headlights, horns blaring, engines growling. To the rest of the city, it was just another night. But to the triplets, this night was heavier than most. Their mother had promised she would return with food, but hours had passed, and she had not come. They tried not to worry. They told themselves she was working late, or maybe she had found something good to bring back. But deep down, even at their young age, they knew the truth. Sometimes promises were made only to give hope, not because they could be kept. The youngest brother, the one who had not eaten at all, looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city haze. His voice was soft, fragile, almost lost in the noise of the street. "Do you think Mama is cold too?" he asked. The eldest pulled him closer, wrapping his little arm round him. "Mama is strong, stronger than us. She'll be okay." But his words trembled, betraying his own doubt. They leaned against each other, small bodies pressed tightly for warmth. Their eyes grew heavy, not from food, but from exhaustion. Yet they dared not sleep, not here, not on the open street. Too many dangers lurked in the shadows. Men who wandered drunk, cars that sped recklessly, the biting cold that could creep into their bones. While they dreamed, and so they waited, hungry, shivering, but together. Just then, the sound of polished shoes echoed against the pavement. Different from the hurried shuffle of ordinary footsteps, these steps were slow, deliberate, commanding. The triplets lifted their heads. A tall man in a tailored black coat approached, his figure outlined by the headlights of a sleek car waiting at the curb. His presence was striking, the kind that made people instinctively step aside without knowing why. His hair was neat, his tie perfectly aligned, his eyes sharp and unyielding. He was a man used to being obeyed, a man who carried the weight of wealth and power in every stride. He was the kind of man who never noticed children like them, and yet, on this night, he did. The triplets stared as the man paused, his gaze falling upon them. For a moment, the world around them seemed to freeze. The cold, the hunger, the noise of the city, everything faded, leaving only the strange connection between a billionaire and three starving boys clutching a piece of bread. The eldest, nervous but polite, lifted his hand. In it was the last fragment of their meal. He extended it forward, his voice trembling but sincere. "Mister, you can have some if you're hungry." The words hung in the air, fragile, unbelievable. This man owned skyscrapers. His name alone could open doors across the globe. He had dined in the most expensive restaurants, flown in private jets, signed deals worth more than the children could imagine in a lifetime, and yet three hungry triplets with nothing in their pockets but crumbs and hope were offering him their last piece of bread. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt something crack inside him. Something no business deal, no luxury, no amount of money had been able to touch. It was as if innocence itself had reached into his guarded heart and pulled out a tear. Asterisk high above the glittering skyline, inside the tallest tower in the city, a different world existed. Here, hunger was not measured by empty stomachs, but by ambition, by deals, by power. On the top floor, behind walls of glass and steel, the office of Alexander Knight, billionaire, CEO, and the man whose footsteps had startled the triplets, looked more like a throne room than a workplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened into the night, offering a sweeping view of the city lights below. His desk, carved from mahogany, gleamed under the soft glow of designer lamps. Not a paper out of place, not a chair askew. Everything reflected control, discipline, precision. But the man who owned it all sat alone. Alexander Knight was a man the world admired, envied, even feared. Newspapers called him ruthless. Magazines declared him a genius. Employees whispered about his temper, his impossible standards, his refusal to tolerate weakness. In every boardroom, he was a storm. In every negotiation, he was fire. But when the doors closed and the lights dimmed, he was quiet. He leaned back in his leather chair, scrolling through numbers on a glowing screen. $1 billion mergers, expansions into new countries, partnerships with governments and corporations. The kind of things most men would never even dream of touching. Yet tonight, none of it seemed to matter. He set the tablet down and rubbed his temples. The silence of the office was deafening. No laughter of children, no warmth of family, just the cold hum of air conditioning, the distant honk of cars, and the ticking of an expensive clock that seemed to mock his solitude. For years, Alexander had told himself that loneliness was the price of greatness, that success required sacrifice, that wealth demanded walls. And so he had built those walls higher and higher until even he could no longer see over them. His assistant had once joked that he lived in his office more than his penthouse. She wasn't wrong. His home, though vast and luxurious, was often empty, marble floors, chandeliers, private pools, all untouched, all unused. The refrigerator stocked with delicacies from around the world, often spoiled before anyone had a chance to taste them. The truth was simple. Alexander Knight had everything and nothing. A knock at the door broke the silence. His assistant peeked in, a cautious smile on her face. "Sir, your car is ready. The gala begins in 30 minutes. Alexander gave a curt nod, rising to his feet. His suit, tailored in Italy, fit him like armor. Every detail spoke of wealth: the polished cufflinks, the gleam of his watch, the subtle cologne that lingered in the air. Yet when he looked in the mirror by the door, his reflection seemed tired. Not physically, but somewhere deeper, in the part of a man that wealth cannot disguise. He left the office, descended into the waiting limousine, and allowed the night to carry him through the streets. Outside his tinted windows, he saw the city alive with lights, vendors calling, children laughing. For a fleeting moment, his gaze lingered on a boy selling flowers at a traffic light, holding them up desperately to passing cars. The boy couldn't have been older than 8. Alexander turned his eyes away. He told himself it wasn't his concern. He told himself that the world was full of such struggles and he could not carry them all. He reminded himself of the gala ahead, the donors, the investors, the cameras, and yet a strange heaviness clung to him. By the time the car reached its destination, he still couldn't shake the image of the boy's small hand pressing flowers against glass. It wasn't hunger or poverty that unsettled him. He had seen both, countless times before. It was the innocence in the boy's eyes, innocence he had long forgotten. He stepped out of the limousine into the golden lights of a grand hotel. Cameras flashed. Guests whispered. Alexander Knight, Billionaire CEO, had arrived. To them, he was untouchable, unshakable, the man who could buy empires. But deep inside, as he adjusted his cufflinks and forced a smile, he carried an emptiness he could not name. Little did he know, that emptiness was about to be filled in the most unexpected way, for at the end of this night, 3 hungry boys with a single piece of bread would change his world forever. The city was quiet that night. Streetlights glowed over rain-washed pavements, reflecting a world that felt changed. What began with a wrong number and a piece of bread had now become a movement whispered about in homes, offices, and even schools. The billionaire CEO, once feared for his cold decisions, was now remembered for a single moment when he let go of pride and chose humanity instead. And at the heart of it all were 3 small boys, triplets, who had nothing, yet gave everything. Months after the world first heard their story, the boys no longer slept hungry. Their mother's health had improved. A modest home had been built. For them, not with marble walls or golden gates, but with warmth, laughter, and shelves full of books and toys that children their age deserved. But the greatest gift was not wealth. It was belonging. The CEO didn't just write checks and walk away. He became family. He showed up at their birthdays, listened to their school stories, and sat on the floor eating simple meals with them. The man who once dined on crystal plates discovered that nothing tasted richer than bread shared with love. The triplets, too, carried their lessons forward. They never forgot the night when desperation forced them to offer their last piece of bread. To them, it wasn't sacrifice, it was hope. A hope that someone bigger, stronger, kinder would hear them. And when the world finally did, it wasn't just their lives that changed. It was everyone's. The Bread and Tears Foundation was born, an initiative that spread from one city to another, ensuring no child would have to choose between hunger and dignity. What started as a heartbreaking story became a movement of compassion that thousands joined. Years later, people would still recall it. Teachers told it in classrooms. Preachers spoke of it in churches. Parents shared it with their children before bedtime. It wasn't the tale of a billionaire, nor even of the 3 hungry triplets. It was the story of how love, in its simplest form, can transform the coldest heart. And on the anniversary of that first fateful meeting, the CEO stood quietly by the waterfront, with the boys now grown taller, stronger, their faces lit with pride. He looked at them and whispered, almost to himself, "You gave me more than I could ever give you. You gave me back my humanity." One of the boys smiled and placed a small piece of bread in his hand, not out of hunger this time, but as a reminder that even in a world full of greed and power, the smallest act of kindness can echo for generations. And so, the story closed where it began, with bread, tears, and the unshakable belief that love, no matter how fragile, always finds a way. Sometimes the poorest hearts teach the richest lessons, and sometimes a single piece of bread can feed the soul of the world. The courtroom had not yet recovered from the children's words. People whispered in hushed voices, shaken by the raw innocence that had pierced through every legal argument. Alexander sat with the triplets clinging to him, their tiny hands still. Trembling, for a fleeting moment, hope filled the air. But Victor Marlowe was not a man who surrendered easily. He was a predator, and predators strike hardest when wounded. As the judge prepared to adjourn for the day, Victor suddenly rose to his feet. His attorney tugged at his sleeve, hissing for him to sit down. But Victor's pride was too swollen, his rage too sharp. "Your Honor," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife, "I request to submit new evidence." The entire courtroom froze. Alexander's heart sank. What trick was this? Victor's smirk returned, wider than before. "I have here official documents, photographs, and sworn statements proving that Mr. Nightshade, so-called savior of orphans, has a dark past. A past he has conveniently hidden from this court." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Alexander shot up, furious. "That's a lie. You forged silence." The judge barked, slamming his gavel. Victor gestured to his lawyer, who carried a thick black folder toward the judge. The sound of its heavy clasp echoed like a death toll. Inside were photographs. Alexander recognized them instantly. Grainy images of him years ago, walking down dark alleys, speaking to desperate men, carrying envelopes that could easily be mistaken for bribes, and letters twisted out of context notes, painting him as a reckless gambler who nearly bankrupted his first business. Even a falsified medical report, claiming Alexander once sought treatment for a violent breakdown. The press snapped photos, hungry for the scandal. The crowd muttered, eyes darting between Alexander and the damning evidence. Clara's face drained of color. The triplets, confused, tugged at Alexander's sleeve. "Papa, why are they saying those things about you?" His throat clenched. He wanted to explain, to scream that it was all lies, but the courtroom gave no space for innocence, only spectacle. Victor spread his arms like a performer taking center stage. "You see, Your Honor, this man is not the saint he pretends to be. He is unstable, dangerous. He has hidden his past to manipulate these children, and perhaps even this court." The judge's brow furrowed. "Mr. Marlowe, these are serious accusations. We will need to examine this evidence thoroughly." Victor's smile widened. "Of course, Your Honor. I only want what's best for the children." His voice dripped with venom, every word carefully calculated. Alexander's attorney leapt to his defense. demanding the evidence be dismissed until verified. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. The reporters scribbled furiously, headlines, forming before ink even dried: "Billionaire savior exposed. Triplets guardian hides a dark secret." The judge finally banged his gavel. "This court will reconvene in 3 days' time to review this evidence. Until then, custody remains undecided." Alexander sank back into his chair, his fists trembling with rage and despair. He knew the truth. He knew the photographs were misleading, the letters fabricated, the report forged. But in the eyes of the world, lies had already taken root. Victor leaned across the aisle, close enough for Alexander to hear, but quiet enough that no one else could. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. "You took what was mine. Now I'll make sure you lose everything. You love—" Alexander's jaw tightened, his heart burning with fury. But as the triplets huddled against him, frightened by the storm that had just begun, he swore silently, "No matter what lies Victor spreads, I will not let him take you away." The gavel struck one final time. Court was adjourned, but the war for the children's future had entered its darkest hour. The courtroom was silent. Not the silence of routine, but the silence of a storm waiting to break. Rows of people filled the benches: journalists, employees, curious strangers. Some leaned forward, their pens poised. Others clutched their phones, already live-streaming snippets of the billionaire CEO's most vulnerable trial yet. The triplets sat together in the front row, their tiny hands linked as if they were a single force. Their wide, honest eyes darted around the intimidating chamber. Every now and then, one of them glanced toward their mother, sitting nervously just behind the witness stand. Her dress was plain, her shoes worn, but the dignity in her posture silenced even the harshest whispers. And then, at the very front, sat the CEO, no longer hidden behind tailored suits and cold boardrooms. Today, he looked human. The sharpness of his jaw was softened by sleepless nights, the weight of responsibility pressing into the lines of his face. When the judge entered, the gavel's crack echoed like thunder. "Order in the court," the bailiff called. The opposing attorney rose first, his voice laced with a polished arrogance. "Your Honor, today we will show that this so-called transformation of the CEO is nothing but performance, a desperate attempt to distract from years of negligence, corruption, and cruelty. This man does not deserve redemption. He deserves consequences." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The triplets flinched, but then the billionaire's attorney, an older woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen both ruin and rebirth, stood calmly. "Your Honor, we will present a very different truth. This is not about money or performance. This is about 3 hungry children, a selfless mother, and a man who, for the first time in his life, stopped running from his humanity." A hush fell again. The CEO was called to the stand. He rose slowly, every step toward the witness chair heavy with the ghosts of his past. When he sat down and placed his hand on the Bible, one of the triplets whispered, "That's Daddy." The sound was small, but the whole courtroom heard it. The judge paused, studying the boy. And in that moment, the billionaire CEO's carefully constructed walls finally cracked. His testimony began not with business jargon, but with a tremor in his voice. "I was a man who thought money could fix everything. I believed loyalty could be bought, love could be replaced, and hunger. Hunger was someone else's problem. But then, 3 children offered me the last piece of bread they had. And in that moment, I realized everything I knew was wrong." Some in the audience lowered their eyes, ashamed of their own cynicism. Others scribbled furiously in notebooks, sensing history being made. The attorney pressed further. "And what did you do then?" The CEO swallowed hard. "I took that bread, and I gave it back." But it wasn't just the bread they gave. It was a chance to become a man worthy of calling them my family. That day changed me forever. The mother's eyes filled with tears. The triplets smiled faintly, as if they had always known this. Ending was waiting for them. The judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "We will hear more evidence before judgment, but I will say this. Sometimes a single act of innocence carries more truth than a lifetime of records." The gavel struck again, but this time it did not sound like thunder. It sounded like hope. The courtroom had awakened not just to a case, but to the power of love over legacy, bread over billions, and children over corporations. And as the session adjourned, the triplets ran to their father, hugging his legs as if to anchor him to the man they had always believed he could be. The courtroom buzzed like a hive of restless bees. Journalists leaned forward, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. The judge rubbed his temples, already weary of Victor's endless theatrics. But Victor, he was radiant with confidence. Like a magician about to pull his greatest trick. He rose slowly, deliberately, savoring the suspense. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "the defense calls Samuel Drake, a name few recognized. But to Alexander, it was a THUNDERCLAP. The doors at the back opened, and in walked a man in his late 50s, his hair graying, his shoulders hunched, but his eyes sharp with cunning. He carried with him an aura of secrets, like a shadow given flesh. Alexander's hands tightened into fists. "Not him," he whispered under his breath. Clara leaned in. "Who is he?" "My former accountant," Alexander muttered. "The man who he cut himself off," his throat dry, because he knew what Samuel Drake was capable of. The bailiff swore him in, and Samuel took the stand, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed directly on Alexander. His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Victor's attorney approached. "Mr. Drake, would you describe your professional relationship with Mr. Knight?" Samuel adjusted his glasses, his voice smooth as oil. "I was his financial advisor for nearly 15 years. And what did that work entail? I oversaw his accounts, his investments, his donations." A pause, then the dagger, and his secrets. Gasps rippled across the gallery. Alexander's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Witness is editorializing." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Sustained. Mr. Drake, please keep to the facts." Samuel bowed his head slightly. "Of course. Facts. That's all I have." But the damage was already done. The implication lingered like smoke. Victor's attorney leaned in closer, voice dripping with false concern. "Mr. Drake, in your professional opinion, is Mr. Knight fit to care for 3 children?" Samuel tilted his head. "Fit." He chuckled. "Softly, I kept his books. I saw the empire he built, and I saw the cost. Every dollar, every deal, paid for with blood, sweat, and betrayal. He is a man who sacrifices everything and everyone for ambition, including people he once called family." The courtroom erupted into whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. Alexander shot up, fury blazing in his eyes. "That's enough. You betrayed me, Drake. I trusted you." Samuel didn't flinch. "You trusted me until I refused to bury the truth. You wanted me silent, Alexander. But I won't be silent anymore. The judge banged his gavel. Order, order. But the chaos wouldn't die down. Cameras flashed, recording every angle of Alexander's fury, every smug grin from Victor, every damning word from Samuel. When the recess was finally called, Alexander stormed into the empty hallway, Clara following close behind. "This is a setup," she hissed. "They've dug into your past, twisted every truth. Victor's pulling strings we can't even see." Alexander pressed his hands against the cold marble wall, his voice breaking. "He was my friend, Clara. He knew everything about me, my mistakes, my struggles, my failures. And now he's handing them to Victor on a silver platter." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you fight back with what he doesn't know, with what only the children can prove." Alexander turned, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and determination. "You're right. If this is about my past, then I'll fight with my present, with my future." Back in the courtroom, Samuel. Drake smiled faintly as Victor whispered something in his ear, because this wasn't just about secrets. This was about destroying Alexander Knight piece by piece. And the worst part, Victor wasn't finished yet. He had one final witness waiting. In the shadows, one that would shatter Alexander's world completely. The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence. Every spectator sensed that something monumental was about to happen. Victor leaned back in his chair, smirking. He believed the case was already his. Alexander sat rigid, his jaw tight, fury from Samuel Drake's betrayal still burning in his veins. Then the judge cleared his throat. "Very well. If both parties are prepared, the court will now hear from the children themselves." A collective gasp, the triplets, the orphans who had been at the center of this storm. The back doors creaked open, and there they were, 3 small figures walked timidly into the courtroom, guided by Clara's gentle hand. Their clothes were simple, their faces pale with nerves, but their eyes, oh, their eyes shone with innocence that no lawyer, no schemer, could ever counterfeit. The crowd leaned forward, breathless. Camera shutters clicked. Even Victor's grin faltered, just for a moment. The bailiff brought out 3 small stools so they could see over the stand. The children sat close together, gripping one another's hands as though the world might swallow them whole if they let go. The judge spoke softly, his tone uncharacteristically kind. "You understand, children, that you're here to tell the truth. Just the truth, nothing else." The eldest of the triplets, a boy with unruly hair and steady eyes, nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good," the judge said, leaning back. "Proceed." Victor's attorney approached first, exuding false warmth. "You poor darlings," she cooed. "We only want to understand what life has been like with Mr. Knight." The children shifted nervously. The attorney smiled. "Tell us, children, has Mr. Knight ever frightened you?" The youngest, a girl, with big, tearful eyes, shook her head. "No, he makes us laugh when we're scared." "And has he ever gone hungry while feeding you?" The boy answered firmly. "Yes, he gives us his food sometimes, even when he's tired." The courtroom stirred. Even the reporters paused, pens hovering mid-air. Victor's attorney frowned, pressing harder. "But children, surely you understand, Mr. Knight is a very busy man. Too busy to be a father, wouldn't you say?" The middle child, a quiet boy who had hardly spoken until now, suddenly lifted his chin. "No, he's never too busy. He tucks us in. He tells us stories. He cries when he thinks we're asleep." A silence fell so heavy, Even the judge shifted in his seat. Alexander closed his eyes. The children's words pierced him like arrows not of pain, but of unbreakable love. Victor, however, was seething. He clenched his fist beneath the desk, his plan unraveling thread by thread. Then came Alexander's attorney. His questions were simple, gentle. "What does Mr. Knight mean to you?" The eldest boy answered without hesitation. "He's our father, maybe not by blood, but by everything that matters. And if you could choose where to live." The three children squeezed each other's hands, their voices uniting in a soft but unwavering chorus. With him, the gallery erupted gasps, muffled sobs, even applause before the judge silenced them with a stern bang of the gavel. But the damage to Victor's strategy was clear. His empire of lies was trembling, weakened not by lawyers or documents, but by the pure truth of three hungry orphans who had found love where they least expected it. As the children stepped down from the stand, Alexander rose instinctively, opening his arms. They rushed to him, clinging to his sides, their tiny hands, gripping his coat as though afraid someone might tear them away. And for the first time in weeks, Alexander allowed himself to smile. Not a smile of victory, but of hope. Yet in the corner of the room, Victor leaned toward Samuel Drake, his voice a hiss. "This isn't over. If love is their weapon, we'll use it against them." And in that moment, everyone knew the war for custody had only just begun.